FBI Director Comey scheduled to testify tomorrow before the House Intelligence Committee. Lawmakers have asked him to clear up this wild allegation by President Trump that former President Obama wiretapped him at Trump Tower before the election. You're on the Senate Intelligence Committee. If Comey testifies that there's no evidence of wiretapping, do you think President Trump needs to apologize to the public and to President Obama so that this whole episode can be put behind him?
Jake, we'll see what Director Comey testifies about tomorrow. I've been on this trip since Thursday night, but I do understand that documents were also delivered to the committee on Friday by the Department of Justice and the FBI. Like the House Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee will review this specific claim, but I do think it's important that we look at the broader context here. As you said, the House Committee hearing tomorrow is going to be in part about the unsubstantiated allegations in the media and by some Democrats of collusion between Trump associates and Russian intelligence. And we have two very high-ranking Obama administration intelligence officers who have disputed that claim. First, Jim Clapper, the director of national intelligence under Barack Obama, a couple weeks ago said that he had seen no evidence of such collusion. And then just this past week, Michael Morell, who is the acting director of the CIA and who endorsed Hillary Clinton, said that there's no fire here at all, not a campfire, not a candle, not even a little spark of any kind of collusion. I think ultimately that matters more to most Americans, given the nature of the allegations that have been made in the past several months about Donald Trump and his campaign and some of his associates.
Well, I don't know exactly to whom you're referring in terms of accusations of collusion, but certainly if anybody who got that wrong should correct the record if there's no evidence at the end of the investigation to suggest it. But what I was asking you about was the evidence for allegation made by President Trump, specifically that President Obama had him wiretapped at Trump Tower. Just as a matter of record, you're on the Senate Intelligence Committee. Do you know of any evidence to support that allegation?
Jake, not that I've seen and not that I'm aware of, but as with all the other claims related to this matter, the Senate Intelligence Committee will be taking them seriously and approaching it in a deliberative fashion to review not only documents from the past year, but also taking testimony of several witnesses. The House Intelligence Committee is holding an open hearing tomorrow, but the Senate Intelligence Committee will be following in that path a little bit later this month. We've been looking into Russia's activities now for quite some time. We've also had hearings on some of the allegations that have been made publicly. We'll continue to do so, and I hope that we can make as many of our findings public as possible.
Let's turn to Obamacare. You've been very critical of the bill supported by our previous guest, Dr. Price, President Trump, House Republicans to repeal and replace Obamacare. You've warned that this bill could put the House Republican majority at risk. One major concern about the plan is the way it might impact lower-income Americans. You come from Arkansas, which is one of the poorest states in the country. If you were designing the plan on your own, would you get rid of the Medicaid expansion that brought coverage to 250,000 people in your state?
Jake, first let me say I served with Tom Price in the House of Representatives and consider him a good friend. He had legislation as a congressman that I think is a lot better than the House bill currently under consideration. The Medicaid expansion, I think, needs to be part of Medicaid transformation, and that's what the House bill moves forward. It can be improved to some degree, but it's about a 70 or 80% solution, Jake. The bigger problem with this legislation is on the private insurance market. I simply think that it's not going to work to bring down premiums for working Arkansans and working Americans all across the country. It's fixable, but it's going to take a lot of work, and we need to roll up our sleeves and focus on fixing those problems rather than trying to rush to some arbitrary deadline.
So I understand that you think Medicaid transformation needs to take place, but your governor just wrote a letter to the Senate Majority Leader and the House Speaker, Governor Hutchinson, saying that this House bill, the Obamacare replacement that President Trump and Dr. Price are pushing, doesn't provide, pardon me, enough flexibility to governors and also doesn't provide enough resources. In short, they're saying this, by removing the Medicaid expansion that happened during Obamacare that helped provide health insurance to 250,000 Arkansans, this replacement is going to take it away. Does that concern you?
Well, Jake, First, I agree that the legislation could provide more flexibility, more discretion to governors and legislatures. It also ought to include tougher provisions on accountability. But second, there is an interaction between the Medicaid parts of this bill and the private market parts of this bill. Medicaid is a welfare program. It's primarily designed for the indigent elderly, the disabled, the blind, and children. It's not designed for able-bodied adults. We want to get those people off of Medicaid, into a job, and into market-based insurance. That's one reason why I worry that the private market provisions of this bill aren't adequate to bring down premiums. Because ultimately, in Arkansas, for instance, tens of thousands of people leave Medicaid every year. I want to make sure that the market insurance system is working for them so they can afford health insurance and get off of Medicaid.
The Washington Post reported this week that the U.S. military is likely to send up to 1,000 more U.S. troops into northern Syria in the coming weeks as part of the fight against ISIS. You are a veteran and have served on the Armed Services Committee. Do you support sending these additional troops?
Jake, I'll review what Secretary Mattis and General Votel of Central Command recommend, as I'm sure President Trump is doing so. I don't think we ought to set arbitrary troop caps. That's what Barack Obama did for 8 years in Iraq and in Afghanistan. We ought to look at our mission and the strategy necessary and the types of troop necessary to accomplish that mission. I will say that on this trip to Lebanon and Jordan and now in Israel, one consistent thing I've heard is the threat that Iran poses. As I've often said, the answer to most questions in the Middle East is Iran. And without Iran and Hezbollah and their activities in Syria, it's a big question whether or not the Islamic State would have risen to the power that they have now. So we have to ultimately destroy the Islamic State. But if we don't roll back Iran's gains throughout the region, we're not going to have stability and we're not going to defend U.S. interests to the degree that we should.
I want to ask you about the scandal involving the sharing of sexually explicit images of Marines by Marines. Some of the people whose photos have been shared are complaining that the Pentagon is not moving quickly enough to investigate this matter, that they don't take the basic charge of sexual harassment, sexual assault against women soldiers, women Marines seriously enough. As a veteran, as a member of the Armed Services Committee, do you agree with that concern?
Well, this behavior by Marines, and likely when the investigation expands by troops from the other services, extremely disappointing. You don't need to have the law read to you. You don't need a regulation or policy stated to you as a young man or woman in our armed services to know that this kind of behavior is unacceptable. We had testimony earlier this week from the Commandant of the Marine Corps and the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps. I can tell you they take it with extreme seriousness and they're moving forward as quickly as they can with the investigation. This information just recently came to light, so the investigation is still in its early stages, but I'm confident they're going to hold every Marine accountable and that the service chiefs of the other 3 services, if such behavior occurred in their services as well, will do the exact same thing, because we have a zero tolerance policy for this kind of behavior in our armed forces, and every soldier, sailor, Marine, and airman knows better whether or not they had a lawyer reading the law to them or not.
Just to clarify, do you know that there are other instances of not just Marines, but sailors, soldiers, etc., doing this, or you're just supposing that it probably is true?
I do not, Jake, but based on the testimony we heard earlier this week and the briefings we've received, we think that it's at least a possibility. Again, they're still in the very early stages. It's unclear, for instance, how many of these, the members of this message board were still on active duty of the reserves versus has retired and were claiming to still be in the Marine Corps. That's why I say it's in the early stages. We'll follow the facts where they take us. But even one person participating in this kind of activity is too much. And any young man or woman in our armed forces knows better than this. I can tell you that from firsthand experience.
Senator Cotton, thank you so much. Good luck over there. Safe travels.
Thanks, Jake.